Okay, so today we are going to discuss first for chapter 35, yeah. Chapter 35 is about market structure. So we can see here the slides, uh, different market structures, yeah. So this is one of the most important topics aside from market failure and efficiency and also indifference curve. This is also one of the main topics in A level. So market structure and their characteristics. So what is market structure? Market structure describe how goods and service are supplied by firms in the market. So you have to understand that in a market or in an economy, we have goods and service. Goods and service will be sold by firms. Goods and service, they will be sold or they will be offered, yeah, they will be sold to customers by firms. And we have different types of firms in a market. How these kind of firms behave, how is the behavior of the firms, that would be discussed in market structure topic. For example, if you mention one industry, let us say you mention restaurant. Restaurant, you can see that most likely there are a lot of restaurants in the economy. There are like millions of restaurants in the country, in the city. There are so many restaurants. And if we want to consider restaurants, so the industry of restaurants, that is one kind of market structure. If we talk about another industry, for example, the automotive or car industry, that will be another market structure. That will be another market structure. If we talk about schools, that's also another market structure. So different industry has different market structure. But market structure is basically how the goods and service that are sold or supplied by firms in the market, what are the ways in which it's distributed, and what are the characteristics of the industry who sells the goods. So what do we want to discuss within market structure? We can see different factors. We can see different factors. What are those different factors? So we can check the different factors include the number of buyers and sellers, the nature of the products, how easy to enter or leave the market, and the degree to which firms will share information. So we have these concepts as the factors that will be affecting industries or affecting firms in a particular market structure. So what's the function of market structure? Why do we learn this topic? So we understand how different markets will function. And this kind of model will act as a benchmark against the real world markets. So you can understand how markets behave. Because when you are talking about this in AS level, we only look at market on its own. We don't categorize market into one kind of market structure. So we only look at, okay, this is firms providing service, or this is firms providing education, or this is firms providing healthcare, let's say, providing laptop or manufactured goods. We do not see like what is the industry behind and what is the characteristic of that industry. So here we just try to look into that. So we have four, yeah. We have four market structure. For information, we have four market structure. So there are four. in general, yeah. Although there can be others modification, but we can safely say that we have 4 market structures. What are those 4? It's here. But before we look at the 4, in actuality, we are looking at 2 types of market structure first, yeah. We have perfect competition and imperfect competition. So before we divide it into 4, we are dividing it into 2 categories. So if I may draw it here, wait, just a moment. So if I may be drawing it here, first of all, very easy to determine. So we have market structure. Okay, so market structure. So we can first divide it into 2. Perfect competition, yeah. Perfect competition. Perfect competition. And the other one would be imperfect competition. Because there's only one perfect competition. When it's perfect, then it's perfect. There's only one perfect competition. And the other one would be imperfect competition. And this will be divided into 3. First is definitely monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition. And then this will be oligopoly. Oligopoly. And of course, monopoly. So this is how we look into it. So we have perfect competition. This is most likely only good in theory. This will be only applicable or only relevant in theory. Most likely, firms in this real world will behave under imperfect competition. So this is number 1. So under monopolistic, oligopoly, or monopoly. That will be the most likely outcome. Okay, so what is the difference? If it is a perfect competition, that means that there are many firms selling identical products. So the products are identical, similar to the case of traditional market who sells vegetables. It will be similar to the case of traditional market who sells vegetables. They are going to sell identical products with no barriers to entry. So it means that new firms can easily enter the market. There is no barriers to entry. Every firm can enter the way they like. Firms are price takers. They are price takers, meaning to say they cannot determine the price. The price will be determined by the market forces. So price takers, meaning they cannot determine the price. The price would be determined by market forces. So no control over prices. And everyone, the customers and the sellers or the firms, have perfect information, meaning they are aware of the goods that the sellers are providing. They are also aware about the prices. Therefore, they cannot play with prices and they cannot play with the market. Everything will be fair and transparent. That is for perfect competition. But for imperfect, we have monopolistic, oligopoly, and monopoly. This will be the opposite of perfect. So they have some control over prices. Products may be differentiated products. There will be barriers to entry. So like not all firms, not everyone can enter. Yeah, not everyone can enter easily. There are some restrictions to enter the market. And there is imperfect information. So normally who has more power? The firms will be having more power over the market. So the firms would have more power compared to customers. So this will be the situation. So now we can have the definition. Monopolistic competition, same like perfect competition, many firms, they sell similar but not identical. The products are similar, but they're not exactly the same, such as restaurant or schools. They are most likely monopolistic. They offer education, they offer food, but the goods are not exactly the same, giving them some control over prices. Because they are not exactly the same, they can still increase or decrease their price according to their product that they sell. But still, there will be low barriers to entry. It's easy to open a new restaurant. It's relatively easy. For schools also, you can easily see that many new schools are incoming, right? There are many schools being established also, so it's quite easy. While for oligopoly, it is getting less. Yeah, the number of firms, if you see the pattern, the number of firms is getting less and less and less. So for oligo, it's like a few large firms dominating the market and have significant control over prices. The moment that the competition is less, the moment that the firm will be more powerful in determining price. I repeat, if there will be less firms, then the competition will be less intense. So it will become relatively easier for firms to set prices and have control over prices. While the products can be similar or it can also be different, and the barriers to entry would be high. Because again, they are huge firms, so it's not easy to enter. This is like automotive firms or banking. It's not easy for a new bank to be established. It's not easy for an automotive firm to be entering a new market because you need huge amount of capital and it's not easy to compete with the existing firms. As I said, the number of firms getting less, so monopoly, only one firm controlling the whole market, so setting the price and no competition at all. High barriers to entry and making it nearly impossible for other firms to compete. So this will be the explanations. So this is how we look into this kind of classification. So why do we classify market structure? So we have a basis, yeah. We have a basis of classifying market structures. It is classified based on the number of firms. So large number of firms, small number of firms. This is perfect competition and it will finally reach monopoly. So more firms mean more competition and fewer firms will suggest oligopoly or monopoly. And whether there is no barriers to entry or there's high barriers to entry, that will be the differentiating factor, yeah. So if there is no barriers to entry, it will again be perfect competition. If it's the highest barriers to entry would be monopoly. That is for barriers to entry. So if there's barriers to entry, that means not easy for new firms to enter. That means competition will be less. And one more is control over price. If you have more control over price as a firm, if you have more control over price, meaning you are more likely of a monopoly. But if you have less control over price, if you have the smallest control over price, then you are a perfect competition. How much can you control the price in the market will determine. And the other one is concentration ratio. When your firm has a higher market share, or when the firms in the industry has a higher market share, meaning if they have a higher market share in the market, they will indicate that they are oligopoly or monopoly. because they are bigger. If they are bigger, that means that there will only be fewer firms in the market who are dominant. Unlike if it is a smaller market share, then it would be low concentration ratio. It's more likely to be a perfect competition or monopolistic competition. Now, the concept of barriers to entry and exit. So barriers to entry and exit means that how easy to enter and how easy to leave the market. What can influence, what can make it easy to enter and what can make it difficult to enter, what can make it easy to exit, what can make it difficult to exit. If the barriers of entry and exit is high, there will be more likely oligopoly or monopoly. But if the barriers to entry and exit is low, that will be more likely for perfect competition and monopolistic competition. We have different barriers that we can see, legal barriers, market barriers, and we shall see first cost barriers, physical, and also barriers to exit. So these are some of the barriers to entry and exit. Legal related to law, regulation. Is there a lot of regulation in the market? If there's a lot, then it will be difficult to enter. But if the regulation is less, it will be easier to enter. Market barriers, meaning more into consumer loyalty or brand loyalty. If the consumers are loyal towards one brand, it will become more difficult for the other brands to enter the market. And then cost barriers. Is the cost of operating a new firm high? Is there a high fixed cost or not? Is there a high sunk cost or not? Is it easy or not to achieve economies of scale? Is it easy or is it difficult to achieve economies of scale? And then physical barriers are the obstacles or geographical limitations. Is it easy to transport the goods? Is it having a good infrastructure or not? If it is not having a good infrastructure, it's difficult for firms to operate. That's barriers to entry. While barriers to exit, you imagine if a firm already enters a market, when a firm has entered the market, let us say a firm has already entered the market, can they easily close down the business again or it's difficult? If it's easy, that means the barriers to exit will be higher. So what makes it easier for business to leave? If the sunk cost is less, if there is no contract obligation, if there is less restriction or rules. So if you don't have a high sunk cost or if the sunk cost is low, it's easier to leave the market. What is sunk cost? Sunk cost is referring to the cost that you have paid and cannot be recovered anymore. When you open a business, you already pay the rent for your building or for your place. This kind of rent has already been paid. You cannot ask for the rent payment back even though you want to close the business. So that means the rent payment that has been done is considered sunk cost because it has already been paid and cannot be recovered. So if you have this kind of sunk cost, you have a lot of obligation, it becomes difficult to leave the market. But if you don't have a lot of sunk costs, if you don't have a lot of restrictions, if you don't have a lot of obligations, it becomes easier to leave the market. And the next subtopic would be performance of firms in different market structures. So we'll likely see one by one, yeah. So from perfect competition and then monopolistic, oligopoly, and then monopoly, we will look at one by one. And also the graph, very important. So perfect competition definition is the market structure in which there are many buyers and sellers. The products are identical or also called homogeneous products. There are perfect information and no barriers to entry. This is the main understanding. And then the characteristics, we can again revisit the characteristics. All buyers and sellers have perfect knowledge. So they know everything about the market, which means that the price will only be determined by market forces. It cannot be determined by the seller because the buyer knows what is the proper price for the goods. No individual firm has any influence on the market price because the firms are price takers. So they follow the market forces. All products are homogeneous or identical. Quality is the same, and also it's very similar to another business like foreign currency or money changer, and also traditional market who sell vegetables and fruits. That will be the closest example of perfect competition. There is complete freedom of entry and exit from the market. Yeah, as I mentioned, the example of industry with perfect competition is agriculture or vegetable and fruit seller or foreign exchange or money changer market because they are selling similar products and basically the quality is also the same and you cannot just increase the price the way you want. It's difficult because people will go to the next door for sure. And this is now the analysis time for the graph. So in actuality, what you need to anticipate is you need to draw this graph. This one, the one that I put a tick mark, this is the graph that you need to draw. But it is actually derived, or why do you have this graph? This graph comes from this graph. So in actuality, this graph comes from this graph. I need to explain first that marginal costs in this chapter and also in general, it will be representing supply. You have to understand that marginal cost represents supply curve. And also, I also need to inform that average revenue represents demand. So this is the basic understanding so that when we explain the graph, it will be very clear to you. So this is a standard demand and supply curve. If you see, this is demand, you draw the demand and you draw the supply, there will be an equilibrium here, right? This will be like an equilibrium. This is like the quantity, and this is the price, the equilibrium. And from here, you can draw a dotted line, and you can put a dot here to indicate the equilibrium. After that, because this is a perfect competition market, the demand curve will be horizontal. The demand curve will be horizontal. It will be perfectly elastic demand curve. The demand curve will be horizontal because again, why is it horizontal? Because they are price takers, right? Because they are price takers, so the price will only be determined by the market and there's only one price. There will only be one price being determined by the market. That will be the conditions. And then after you draw the demand curve, so when we draw this kind of graph, you start with demand. After you draw the demand curve, then you can draw the marginal cost. This is the marginal cost curve. It's like a tick mark or Nike symbol, marginal cost curve. You draw it. And this is the meeting point, right? As we know, equilibrium always happens when supply meets demand or marginal cost is equal to average revenue. That will be the conditions that we are looking at, and that will be the equilibrium point. So after we already draw the demand curve and the supply curve, or the AR and also the MC, then we can draw the ATC. As we know and as we have learned before, the ATC would be a U-shaped curve. So it's a U-shaped curve, something like this. This is how the ATC looks like. It's a U-shaped curve. So you draw the ATC there. And this is showing the short run graph. In the short run, in the short run, firms operating in the perfect competition market, in the short run, firms operating in the perfect competition market is able to earn supernormal profit. I repeat, in the short run, firms operating in the perfect competition is able to earn supernormal profit. Where can we see the supernormal profit? So where can we see the supernormal profit? The supernormal profit can be seen as this one. And how do we know it's that one? The supernormal profit is always the gap between average revenue and average cost. So you have to check from the diagram. You find average revenue, you find average total cost or AC or average cost, you find the gap. That vertical distance, that vertical gap will indicate supernormal profit. If there is no vertical gap, that means that there is no supernormal profit. If there is no vertical distance, then there will not be any supernormal profit, as we can check later in the next slide. Okay, so to review, intersection of supply and demand determine the market equilibrium price and quantity. Firm maximizes profit by producing at the point where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So you need to know one new understanding, yeah. When is profit maximized? So if there's a question asking, when is profit maximized? Profit maximization is when marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. That will be profit maximization. And it is true because the firm is operating where marginal cost, this is marginal cost, and this is marginal revenue here. They're operating at this point. So they are achieving profit maximization. That is why you are able to see supernormal profit in the diagram. Because they are charging a price, basically what? They are charging a price or average revenue, yeah, or the price is higher than average cost. Therefore, there will be supernormal profit happening. This is in the short run. Perfect competition graph in the short run. But in the long run, what happens? You can see the changes. In the long runs, there will be new entrants to the industry. In the long run, there will be new entrants to the industry. So if there are new entrants, there will be more and more firms selling the product in the industry. Therefore, the supply curve will shift to the right because there are more firms supplying. When the supply curve shifts to the right, what does it indicate or what does it mean? That means that there will be a fall in price, like what we always discuss in basic economics or IGCSE and AS level. When there are more supply, when there are more firms providing, price would be going down for sure. When price goes down, what happens? We can see that it will be reflected here from this diagram that the demand curve, the demand curve or the average revenue curve will be down instead of here. So instead of it being here, they will be located here down. So this will be the average revenue or the demand curve. So way lower because the price will be lower. Why would the price be lower? Because there are more firms in the market. So at this moment, you can again draw the marginal cost curve, and you can see that this is the equilibrium point because that will be where the average total cost is drawn. Yeah, that will be where the average total cost curve is drawn, and because of that, it will be only normal profit. Why is it normal profit? Because there is no vertical distance anymore. Why is it normal profit? Because there is no vertical distance anymore. And as we know, average revenue is equal to average cost. under this situation because they meet, right? They are intersecting. If they meet or if they are intersecting, that indicates the average revenue is equal to average cost. And of course, only normal profit is obtained. There is no more supernormal profit. So that will be the explanation that in the long run, there is no more supernormal profit. There is only normal profit left in the long run. And that will be happening because there are more firms entering. And why are more firms entering? Because again, there is no barriers to entry. So everyone or every firm can enter the market under perfect competition. Now, we have to understand also the term shutdown price. Shutdown price refers to the price level at which firms will stop producing in the short run because they cannot cover their variable costs. And this will happen when the price will fall below average variable costs. Or we can also say when the average revenue, or the price is lower than average variable costs, then there is no point of you selling something if you cannot even cover your average variable costs. Makes sense, right? Why would you continue operating your business? Why would you continue selling chicken if you cannot even cover the raw material of buying chicken from the market? Why do you continue selling chicken to your customers if you cannot even cover the variable cost of buying chicken? So that will be the shutdown price. So there's no point anymore if the average revenue is already less than average variable cost. And now we can observe what kind of situation can be acceptable in the short run, what kind of situation can be acceptable in the long run. So we shall see the comparisons here. Now, if the price, let me put a dot here. Okay. If the price is less than P1, so if the price is less than P1 here, if it's lower, let us say the price is here. Let us say it's P2. There is no point of the firms to operate because the price is already under average variable costs. If the price is exactly at P1, then it is fine because they can cover the average variable cost if it's at P1. They are able to cover the average variable cost. However, they can only operate in the short run. They can only operate in the short run because they still cannot cover the fixed costs or the other costs. Because they still cannot cover the fixed cost or the other costs, so they can only operate in the short run. But if it is here, if the price is already here, that means they are already able to operate in the long run. So if the price is at P, it's already meeting with the average total cost. That means the firm is able to enjoy at least normal profit. That means the firm is already able to enjoy at least normal profit. And it is good to operate in the long run because they can cover both variable and fixed costs. Okay, that is the summary for this paragraph. And we have an additional information. So in perfect competition, firms will only make different amounts of profit from each other if they have different cost structure, because it all depends on the cost. As we know, the price is difficult to be adjusted. So the behavior will be limited, and the only way to boost profit is to make them more productive or lower their average total cost. And supernormal profit will only be a feature of perfect competition in the short run. Why? Because the existence will only be like an incentive for new firms. So in the short run, there would be supernormal profit. This will attract new entrants from outside to enter the market. And because there is no barriers to entry, there will be higher supply of output in the market. And when there's more supply, of course, the market price will eventually fall because higher supply will always lead to lower price and the supernormal profit will diminish. That will be the situation. And that is done for perfect competition. Of course, we still have the other market structure, but once you understand one market structure, it becomes easier for another market structure. Except for oligopoly, which is quite different on its own. The next is monopolistic competition. It's a type of market structure where many companies are present in an industry. So there are many companies similar to perfect competition, and they produce similar but differentiated product. Products are similar, but they are differentiated. And this type of market structure is similar to perfect competition because of the large number of competing firms, but again, they have differentiated product. It's not the same from one firm to the other. Characteristics will be numerous buyers and sellers, few barriers to entry and exit. So there is still some barriers, but still few. Wide choice of differentiated product. And because they are differentiated, so firms have some influence on market price, and they are considered price maker. That will be the conditions. And this is the graph. Since you are aware of the graph from before, so how do we actually draw this graph? You always draw the demand curve. And what is the difference with this graph and the previous one? Is that the demand curve is not horizontal. The difference with perfect competition is that if you see the demand curve here, it's no longer horizontal, it's slanted, it's a normal demand curve. And that's the number one difference. The second difference is that the marginal revenue is not equal to average revenue anymore. Why is it not equal? Because of course the price is not always the same, right? So of course there's a difference. Price may vary or price may change, right? So the marginal revenue is no longer equal to average revenue. So this is how you draw the marginal revenue. That's step number one. Step number one is to draw the demand curve. Step number two is to draw the marginal revenue. After that, you will draw the marginal costs. And then where is the market, or where is the market structure or the firm operating or operates? They always operate. So this is another knowledge for you to know. Whatever the market structure is, that they always operate where MC equals MR. So you need to put a dot. You always need to put a dot where MC is equal to MR, where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. That is where they always operate. Yeah, that is where they always operate. Where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. That's why they operate here. Then you bring it down, then you know the output that they are selling. However, do note that the price will be not at this point. Yeah, this is not the price. So it's not here. It's not this one. It's not P3. Yeah, the price is not P3. The price, when you want to determine the price, you always put a dotted line up. You always bring it up from this point. So from this point, you always bring it up. From this MC equals MR, that is your output, right? That will be your output. You bring it up to this point. So the price is set at that point. So the price is set at that point. So you can see the price there. And because of that, for this question, okay, then we're done. Right? We're done determining the AR, MR, MC. Then of course, the final step is to draw the ATC. Okay, I do not trace anymore for ATC because it's already red color, yeah. So it's ATC, this one. And remember, in the short run, supernormal profit exists. So when you draw the ATC curve, when you want to draw the ATC curve, make sure that the ATC is located below the demand curve. I repeat, because it's a short run graph, so make sure when you draw the U-shaped ATC, it will be below the AR curve. It has to be below the AR curve. when you draw the ATC curve, so that you can determine the supernormal profit. Because the supernormal profit would be the distance between AR and AC, the vertical distance and the area that I shade here, that will be the supernormal profit. That will be the idea. Of course, if you can just practice this, it will be very, very easy to draw eventually. But in the short run, a monopolistically competitive firm can earn supernormal profit because the price P is higher than the ATC. So the price P is higher than ATC, and also fewer competitors, and there are also product differentiation, right? The competitors are less compared to perfect competition, and also there is some product differentiation which allows it to charge a price higher than ATC. The shaded area represents the supernormal profit, which is the difference between the price and the ATC multiplied by the quantity. To get profit, you multiply price with quantity. However, in the long run, this supernormal profit would likely attract new entrants, leading to reduced demand. Again, in the long run, supernormal profit will be diminished, will be normal profit remaining. Now, this is what happens. Why does this happen? Because there would be a fall in demand. Therefore, there will be a shift of the demand curve to the left. You compare, the demand curve is here, it shifted to this point here, shifted to the left. Why is it shifting to the left? Because there is a fall in demand. Why would there be a fall in demand? Because there are more firms entering the market. So the demand naturally falls because there's more competition. The demand falls. When this happens, you will again draw the same procedure, but there is no more supernormal profit, because what happens now is that the average revenue will be equal to average cost. So there is no more supernormal profit, only normal profit remains under this case in the long run, because average revenue is now equal to average cost. So in the long run, the firm is making normal profit. Why are the firms making normal profit? Because again, new firms enter the market. Why are they entering the market? Because they see the potential to make supernormal profit. If they see the potential, they would like to try and enter the market. But after they enter, competition becomes more, competition becomes intense. When competition becomes intense, the profit-making ability would be less, leaving normal profit only. So that is the conditions under this diagram. So we're done with perfect competition and also done with monopolistic. And we're going to continue with oligopoly. So what's oligopoly? Oligopoly is where there are few firms only, and they have market power to prevent the entrance and deter the competition from entering. The products can be wide-ranging. So firms are price makers, as they have some control over price depending on the market power of competitors. They are price makers. Yeah, oligopoly is price makers. It will not be a price taker. It is a price maker because they can control the prices. Of course, characteristics will be different from the previous two. Number of firms is few, barriers to entry would be high, and information available. There is now some information available for both parties. Yeah, like the customers know a bit, and the firms maybe they know a little bit more. So there is some information available, not perfect information anymore. The product differentiation, it can be differentiated product for oligopoly, but it can also be identical or similar. Like the automotive industry, it can be identical products between different automotive firms. the products can be very, very similar to one another. And they have some control over price. Why is it like that? Because again, for oligopoly, the keyword is they are interdependent. Yeah. So the decisions taken by firms are interdependent. So firms must decide their market strategy to compete with the rivals. So they have different strategies that can be taken, and we are going to look at the strategies one by one after this. But before we look at the strategies or the ways, then we will look at one term that is called concentration ratio. Concentration ratio measures the extent to which a small number of firms dominate total output or sales in an industry, used to measure the power of firms in a market. Like if it's higher concentration ratio, meaning like one firm is dominating the whole market or almost dominating the whole market, that is considered high concentration ratio. And what's the formula? It can be found by calculating the market share of a given number of firms and eventually dividing it by the total market size. So market share of a given number of firms, you divide by the total market size. And this concentration ratio will likely indicate like what kind of market structure are you in. If your result of calculation is greater than 60%, it will be highly oligopolistic market structure. And now we have two ways oligopolists behave. It can be aggressive behavior. It can be cooperative behavior. Okay, so this is the interesting part. It can be aggressive behavior. It can be cooperative behavior. Aggressive meaning what? Meaning they will be the dominant, they will try to control the market that they are operating. They will try to be price makers. Because again, oligopolies have control over setting prices, right? They are considered price makers, so they can try to lower their price, and that would result in a price war. They try to lower their price, and when they do lower their price, other companies would also try to replicate or try to have the same action. So other companies will also try to lower their price to stay competitive. Company would only start this kind of war or this kind of lowering price strategy if they know their production costs are lower or if they can be more efficient compared to their competitors. So this can happen, yeah. Aggressive meaning what? You try to lower your price so that more customers will go to you. But there is a danger when you lower price, other firms might follow. So that's the negative side of this approach. We will still focus on aggressive competition because later we will have the cooperative. And what kind of situation is this called? Like when you try to lower the price, other firms will try to follow, and this will result in a kinked demand curve, which will be shown after this. It is called a kinked demand curve. So the model assumes that oligopolistic firms are interdependent, so like they are connected. So the action of one firm will influence other firms. The action of one firm is going to influence another firms. Because each firm they want to compete, they don't want to collude, they don't want to cooperate. So this is approach one, is they want to be aggressive and they want to be competing. They want to be aggressive and they want to be competing, and they do not want to cooperate or collude. That's why when the price is decreasing, other firms will also try to do the same thing. Okay, so this is the king demand curve. And this is the best position. So according to the king demand curve, This is our position, yeah. This is our position. The red dot that I draw is our current position. So the oligopoly's best position is at the king, where the price P and Q is being supplied. So this is the position. Now, let us say we are trying to lower the price. If we try to lower the price, our competitors will also try to replicate our strategy. That's why the demand curve is relatively inelastic. If you see this one, it's relatively inelastic. It is represented by a relatively inelastic demand curve. It is represented by a relatively inelastic demand curve. So if we lower our price, our competitors will follow our footsteps. They will also lower the price. However, the demand is represented by an inelastic demand curve. What does it mean? If the demand is represented by an inelastic, that means lowering price is not going to be beneficial because lowering price will lead to lower revenue. You need to go back to AS level concept of elasticity. But suppose the firm decides to increase their price. If they increase their price, the problem is competitors might not follow what you do. If you increase your price, competitors might keep their prices the same. Competitors might keep their prices the same. If competitors might keep their prices the same and you are increasing, this will be represented by a relatively elastic demand curve. It will be represented by a relatively elastic demand curve. And due to that, what will happen is that it will not be beneficial because again, it is elastic. That means increasing price is not good. It doesn't match with elastic demand. So when you increase price, you lose revenue. You lose potential revenue. That will be the conditions. But there's limitations of king demand curve because the model, it's showing the king at a certain price and output, but that is a chosen point that we determine ourselves. It might not be reflecting the real situation. But anyways, king demand curve shows one certainty is that there is a price rigidity concept. What we can guarantee is that king demand curve will definitely show price rigidity concept. And what is price rigidity? It refers to the situation in which prices in the market are slow to change. So the prices in the market are not going to be changing because it is not beneficial if it's changing. So it's better to stabilize or set the price at that level. That is why firms operating in oligopoly has the tendency to keep their prices stable for extended periods of time. Because as we just explained before, if one firm increases the price, the other firms are not going to follow, so you will lose your customers. But if you do decide to lower your price, everyone will follow your footsteps. So the profit of all firms will go down because the price is lower. So either way, it's not beneficial. Because of price rigidity, oligopoly can actually focus on something else, which is called non-price competition. So they have difficulty to adjust price. The price is rigid, so now it's much better for them to focus on other ways to compete. What are the other ways to compete? They can go through advertisement and promotions, can go through product innovation, brand proliferation or making it more loyal for the customers, market segmentation, or process innovation. So these are the strategies of non-price competition that can be taken by firms because they have difficulty to determine their No, they have difficulty to implement price competition. And now there's a prisoner's dilemma. Okay, prisoner's dilemma. Because I mentioned earlier that we have two approach. One is aggressive, one more is to cooperate or collusion. So we have two different approaches. So we're going to see now. Why would it be difficult also to cooperate? There's also difficulty to cooperate also because of the prisoner's dilemma. So what is prisoner's dilemma is why two rational people might choose not to cooperate. And it's presented below with this scenario. So we have Davi and Bagas here. They're arrested for a robbery and they are both locked in separate rooms and are not allowed to communicate at all. Now the police wants to convict both on a serious charge, but have only enough evidence to convict both on a less serious charge. Meaning to say, like, they will be put to a charge that is less serious because the evidence that the police has is only less. So Davi and Bagas, each one of them are offered a deal by the police. They can choose to betray the other by testifying that this other person committed the crime and they can go free, or they can also cooperate and stay silent. So both of them cooperate to stay silent and they will both get 1 year each. But if they get betrayed, like if the other person betrays them but they stay silent, the betrayed one will be the only one punished with 3 years, while the one who stays the betrayed one is the one who stays quiet. Yeah, the betrayed one is the one who stays quiet, will be the one punished 3 years, while the one who testify will go free. But if they both betray each other, they will get 2 years each. So this is the prisoner's dilemma. You cannot control the action of the other firm. This is like the price rigidity concept. You cannot control the other person's action. You can only control your action. Okay, so this is the conditions. If both stay silent, but this is not through communicating. Yeah, we don't communicate here. If both of them eventually stay silent, both of them will only have 1 year each. Both of them will only have 1 year each. But if both of them decides to betray each other, then each of them needs to serve 2 years. Yeah, each of them needs to serve 2 years. But if one stays silent and the other will be testifying, then the one who is testifying will go free, and the one who stays silent will go for 3 years. So this is the condition of prisoner's dilemma. Yeah, this is a very important concept because you cannot control the action of the other. You can only control your actions. Okay, so what is the best? What is the best that can be done? What is the best that can be done by each person? The most realistic outcome in the prisoner's dilemma is for both prisoners to betray each other. So the most realistic outcome is for both prisoners to betray each other. Because of course you cannot like expect other people to stay quiet. Yeah, you don't know what they think. You can never expect others to behave the way that you want them to do or to behave, and you can never be sure that they can be relied. Yeah, so it's better for you to be aggressive. It's better for you to be the one testifying. So each prisoners knows that if they cooperate by staying silent, but the other person testify or betray, they'll face the worst outcome. To avoid the worst outcome, it is much better for you to betray the other person. So under this story, it's better for you to speak. It's better for you to testify. So you have a chance of less punishment or shorter punishment. Because you do not know other people's decision. Same case with economics, you also do not know other firms' decision. And how does it relate to oligopoly market structure? Because it shows how companies in an oligopoly may struggle to cooperate. even if you know it's best to cooperate, you may not want to cooperate. That is why companies often choose between competing, like lowering their prices, or cooperating, like agree to keep the price high. So there's two options again. However, if you base it on the prisoner's dilemma concept, eventually it's more likely for them to compete because you can never trust the other party or the other company. So you can only rely on yourself. So it's better for you to be aggressive and lowering the price to be safe. And now cooperative is like cartel also, yeah, similar to cartel. Like you are agreeing on a certain price or on a certain conditions. Collusion in oligopolistic market is when the few companies that dominate the market decide to work together instead of competing against each other. And sometimes it makes sense for companies to share resources and information, especially when they are spending a lot on research and development and technology is changing quickly. For example, during COVID-19, companies came together to produce a vaccine quickly during health crisis. This is during COVID. Or oil, also they agree on a certain price. Yeah. And this is not a healthy agreement because it will be making a disadvantage to the customers. Usually in an oligopoly, there will be a price leader. There will be one firm in an oligopoly who is dominant and they can determine the price. If they are the one determining the price, other companies in the oligopoly will likely follow the price determined by them. And usually the price leader is the one uh, having the highest market power or having the highest market share. That is the normal thing that happens. Okay. So for cartel, companies will explicitly agree on prices or production level to keep competition low and profits high. This is cartel, yeah, like oil, OPEC. And it will be done in an illegal manner because all firms agree to set output low so everyone can act as a single seller and make as much profit as possible. Because low supply will allow for higher prices. If the supply is low, prices will go up. That is the rule in economics. And that is can be done through cartel or agreement between firms. Okay, so this is before monopoly. This is cartel and the prisoner's dilemma. How does it relates to prisoner's dilemma? So all members of the cartel stick to the agreed production level. So you have to produce at that level. And because you agreed to produce at that level, it would ideally result in higher profit for everyone because it reduces the supply and the price will boost up. It will increase. However, there's a problem when one of the firm is being stubborn or they are trying to manipulate or they're trying to secretly increase the production output without telling the others, or they will be cheating and therefore they will be gaining extra profit. As always, we can never control other people's or other firms' behavior, so there might be cheating happening. There might be extra quota being sold, and when that happens, then the cartel will be breaking, and again, prisoner's dilemma theory will be implemented, and again, everyone will be disadvantaged. Okay, so we are done with oligopoly also. And then we can see, of course, one other thing is monopoly, yeah. So the final part would be monopoly because we have four market structure at least. So monopoly, there are two kinds of monopoly, pure and natural monopoly. Yeah. So we have pure monopoly and we have natural monopoly. And of course, we will begin with pure. So what is the meaning of pure monopoly? So pure monopoly is where a single firm controls the entire output of the industry. So pure happens as time goes by, usually. Like natural means it's already like that from the start, while pure is like as time goes by, one company becomes more and more and more dominant as time goes by. When one company becomes more and more and more dominant as time goes by, then they become pure. Like maybe there are a lot of companies before, but some other companies lose out in the competition and one remains. Some other companies lose out in the competition and finally one or two remains, and that is how pure monopoly is formed. So monopoly is used to describe a situation where one firm has a very large share of the market. Monopolies are at the opposite end of the spectrum compared to perfect competition, so it's the other extreme. In practice, a monopoly can occur when a firm has a dominant position in terms of its market share, and there is no guarantee that you are the only firm. I repeat, it doesn't mean that if you are a monopoly, you must be the only firm. No, yeah. It can happen if you are the dominant firm, even though there are other small firms, it's okay. You can still be considered monopoly. Okay, so characteristics of monopoly, single seller, no close substitutes, because normally you are the only one that is powerful, high barriers to entry, and of course you are a price maker. You can determine price the way you want. Local monopoly can also exist where there are relatively small firm dominates a local market. That is called local monopoly. So the monopoly is only for that particular area. So monopoly can be strong. Monopoly can also be localized. So it's just that for one particular area. Okay, so how do we describe the situation that happens in monopoly? The demand curve is also downward sloping. So it's very similar to monopolistic competition. So for monopoly, the diagram, it's very similar with monopolistic competition. It's a downward sloping market demand curve. It's going to be more inelastic compared to monopolistic competition. So the demand curve is going to be a bit more inelastic because they have higher market power and of course there's less competition, right? So of course consumers would have less choice and would have to buy from this firm regardless if there's an increase in price, they would have to buy from this firm also. But sometimes it's also very difficult for monopoly to earn higher profit, even though they can have the privilege of setting prices. It is also difficult for monopoly to set higher prices because of what? Because the fixed cost sometimes is very, very high for monopoly. So sometimes if you set higher prices, it might not cover the cost also. It's like barely covering the cost, so the profit would still be less even though you are already setting a higher price. And this will be the situation. And as I said to you, I will not be explaining a lot for this because the diagram is exactly the same or very, very similar with the monopolistic competition. So you can have the same procedures in drawing like a monopolistic competition. Only thing that I want to emphasize is that it will always be operating at the point where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. For all firms, yeah, for all firms, it is always operating where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. It will always be operating at that point. It is the profit maximizing point because the idea is that firms will always try to maximize their profit to gain supernormal profit. And in this diagram, you can see that it does happen that supernormal profit is obtained. Yeah, it does happen that supernormal profit is obtained under this situation. Okay, so in monopoly, there is no distinction between the short run and the long run. That's the differences between monopoly and monopolistic competition. So there is no distinction between short run and long run because of the barriers that prevent the entry of competitors. So it will just be the same. The price can be determined by the firm themselves, and there is not going to be any additional competitors, or there will be no additional firms in the long run. So it's up to them to decide the price. They can determine the price, so they can determine whether they are going to achieve supernormal or normal profit in the short and long run. It's up to them. And they can actually increase their profit if they want to increase price, or they can also implement a concept called price discrimination. What is price discrimination? It's like setting different prices to different consumers. Yeah, setting different prices to different consumers. That will be for monopoly. Using a price discrimination. Yeah, using a price discrimination concept. So we have here the rules, yeah, for learning market structure. You will have to understand these rules. So allocative efficiency. Yeah, allocative efficiency is MC is equal to AR. Yeah, MC is equal to AR. Allocative efficiency, that is the rule. It's actually, this particular part is going to be discussed later when you learn chapter 36 and 37 about firms' objectives. But again, you have to understand this kind of situation. Firms will always be operating here, yeah, MC equals to MR, but there are other scenarios or situations dependent upon the question that firms have a different objective. For example, achieving allocative efficiency, achieving productive efficiency, achieving revenue maximization, or achieving sales volume maximization. Like MC is equal to AR, MC is equal to AC, MR is equal to 0. So these kinds of explanation needs to be understood. Yeah, this one, these points, you need to remember it so it's easier when we face the questions. Now, aside from pure, we also have natural monopoly. And what's the difference? Natural monopoly meaning monopoly already happens from the start. That's natural monopoly. So it's from the start, the industry is better operated as a monopoly. And this is usually true for government run or government owned businesses, for government run or government owned businesses. For government run or government owned businesses. And when we say government run or government owned businesses, what kind of business are we referring to? Electricity, or the national electricity provider, or PLN, or we can also refer to water companies that is from the central government. This kind of companies is much better if we use natural monopoly. So if we use natural monopoly, it will be much better. Because of what? Because they are more efficient, when they are bigger, when they're operating at a larger scale, they are more efficient. So from the start, they will be, only them will exist from the start. And there are two logic, because they are more efficient, economies of scale can be achieved. And second, because simply no other firm would be willing to enter in this kind of market. So they will sustain their natural monopoly status. Different with pure monopoly, who is actually monopoly who develops over time. Well, for this one, it already happens from the start. Also, natural monopoly might not have the objective of profit maximization because they are again looking for welfare or social objectives. So the objective might not always be to gain the highest profit possible. A diagram will be very similar, no differences, but as you can see, they might not always operate at this quantity level. Yeah, they might not always operate at this quantity level. Sometimes they might choose to operate at this quantity level or quantity one. So also they might also try to operate at quantity one, even though it might be less profitable, but they would like to provide more for the society, achieving allocative efficiency, which is in this case, this is going to be MC equals AR, which is MC is equal to AR. Yeah, that will be the conditions. And why is that happening? Because again, they are a government run or government owned business. So of course they will be willing to do so. So it's okay to make a loss as long as they're able to achieve the social objectives. So they might not be operating where MC is equal to MR at times. It depends on their objectives. This is for natural monopoly, government owned monopoly. So that means how do they manage their operations? And of course, subsidies need to be supported by the government so that they can still run the business even though they are making a loss. Then there needs to be subsidies, there need to be support given by the government. And that is represented by the blue area. If the monopoly is a private monopoly, then of course subsidies needs to be given by the government to support. But if it's government owned, then it is fine loss making for temporarily loss making is fine to achieve social objectives. Yeah, so this is the discussion that we actually have for market structure topic. Yeah, so we discuss market structure for today's uh, topic discussion. So hopefully it will be quite clear for market structure, but actually there's still contestable market for market structure, but at least we covered the main market structure of perfect competition, monopolistic, oligopoly, and monopoly.